Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we are in Lesson 17 of the Gospel of Luke, and we're covering Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 49, and this one's called Wait Upon the Lord. God's calling on our lives is not an easy one. It always comes down to love. As we've been reminded, it is easy to love those who love us. That is not much of a challenge. But it is quite another level to love those who hate us and forgive those who have no issue walking all over us. The behavior exhibited by Jesus, which he calls for us to follow, is one that exhibits all of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That is much easier with strangers than it is with family, or even some neighbors who know exactly how to press our buttons. Politics gets me stirred up too. I guess I will just have to admit that God is still working with me here, and the passages that we are addressing today are convicting. Let's read the first passage. Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 42 says this. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. And he spoke a parable to them. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into the ditch? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, Brother, let me remove the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the plank that is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck that is in your brother's eye. It is easy to see this behavior in the life of Jesus, and near impossible to see this kind of behavior when dealing with other people. The golden rule is paramount: treat others the way that we would like to be treated. I don't think God is calling us to be doormats, but it takes a whole lot of spiritual discernment to figure out when it is just fine to stand up for what we think is right and when we should just grin and bear it. When Jesus was being interrogated before his crucifixion, an officer struck Jesus, and we see this verbal exchange in John 18, verses 22 through 23. And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Do you answer the high priest like that? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? For most of this trial, Jesus fulfilled prophecy from Isaiah that he opened not his mouth. We don't see Jesus slapping the officer in return, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a slap for a slap. But he did ask the officer why he was slapped. He did not just turn the other cheek. Like I said, this takes discernment, and it is really difficult to not get angry. This makes me think of Israel. When Israel does not retaliate, the Muslim nations surrounding Israel are not impressed by Israel's humanism. Instead, the Muslim nations view that as weakness. But the most important aspect of this is to remind ourselves that we are sinners, and our sin stinks as much as the sin of others. It sounds like this passage is telling us to clean the sin out of our lives before addressing the sin in the lives of others. But we are really missing the point. The sin in our lives will remain because we are sinners. Really, this is telling us to focus on our own issues instead of looking at the sin, failures, and shortcomings in others' lives. It is really encouraging us to just forgive others. If we're guiding others, we better open our eyes and watch out for ditches. Otherwise, we will lead others into ditches too. I remember a song with an interesting chorus. A groove is a rut, a dent in the ground. You get in that rut and go round and round. A rut is a ditch before too long, and a ditch is a grave with two ends gone. So look out for the groove. This reminds me of the Blue Angels or Thunderbirds when following the leader. Both of these groups are precision aerial demonstrations, with the Blue Angels representing the Navy and the Thunderbirds representing the Air Force. If the leader crashes when doing a loop near the ground, all the planes will likely crash too. Back in 1982, all the planes from the Thunderbirds in a diamond formation crashed at one time. Only the lead pilot was looking ahead. The other pilots focused on the tail of the plane ahead of them and the wings of those beside them. It was the blind leading the blind. Let's read the next passage. Luke chapter 6, verses 43 through 45 says this. For a good tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from a bramble bush. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. I had an orange tree in my backyard when I lived in Southern California. There was a time when some of the oranges on the tree had turned orange and some were still green. My neighbor, who was not the brightest lady I've ever known, asked where I was able to find a tree that was half oranges and half limes. I guess part of the gift in distinguishing between good fruit and bad fruit is logic. No matter what that lady did, she was not going to find a good lime on my orange tree. Two of the most important aspects of bearing fruit are these. A branch does not work to produce fruit, but it happens naturally when connected to the vine. And the only way of knowing the difference between good fruit and bad fruit is by tasting it. John 15 gives us a wealth of information on fruit and fruit bearing. John 15 verses 4 through 5 says this, Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. The only chance that we have of bearing good fruit will occur when, as branches, we are attached to the vine, and the vine is Jesus. If we are simply branches growing on our own, there never will be any fruit on our branches. One of the easiest ways to find out how attached we are to the vine, to Jesus, is to look inside our own lives and hearts and see if the fruits of the Spirit are visible in our lives. My most challenging fruits are patience, gentleness, and self-control. I've never been interested in fishing, as I am far too impatient to wait for a fish. In similar manner, surfing does not interest me either. Waiting for a wave. In sports, my brain was wired for continuous action. But in the Christian walk, we need to exhibit patience. One of the top 3 of God's answers to our prayers is not now, with the other answers of yes and no. I would almost rather receive a no answer than a not now, as the latter will reveal that I need to keep on praying and keep on waiting. But Isaiah tells us in Isaiah 40:31, But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. God supplies sustenance in His time, but His sustenance is for our endurance. The Christian walk will take endurance. It is definitely not a short sprint. We will have many successes and many failures along the way, and we can learn through both. But the end goal is the same for all of us, that we finish the race strongly and that God completes his work in us. Let's read the last passage. Luke chapter 6, verses 46 through 49 says this. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say? Whoever comes to me and hears my sayings and does them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house, who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently against that house, and could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But he who heard and did nothing is like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. Lord is a title that designates authority, power, and sovereignty. If Jesus is the Lord of our lives, it is because we look at him as the ruler over our lives, the King of our lives. Why would we call Jesus King if we were not going to follow his orders? Most people look at the Bible as a rule book, and when we see the Bible through those eyes, it is so overwhelming trying to follow all the laws perfectly. As I've stated before, instead of being a rule book, I prefer to look at the Bible as a treasure map. Jesus is the treasure we will find if we read, study, and apply the Bible to our lives. We're going to fall into some quicksand occasionally. We also might have to walk the plank, battle a few pirates, and find ourselves shipwrecked. But if we keep studying the map, the Bible, and applying it to our lives, we will find ourselves emulating our King. We love others not because it is easy, but because our King has demonstrated that love in our lives. He loved us first. We forgive others because he has forgiven us. There's not one positive attribute that Jesus wants to see in us that we cannot see in him. The analogy within this verse turns to the foundation of a house. No house we build will stand unless it is built on the chief cornerstone. Jesus is the solid rock. Isaiah 28, verse 16 says, Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth shall not make haste. We sang this verse often while driving through Israel on a bus. God chose Israel as the nation where Jesus would be born. If God is in control and our trust is in Jesus, he will complete his work in us in his time. There's no reason to be in a hurry. Patience and time seem to battle each other. But as time is designated by God, we should patiently wait on him. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.